What's up everyone, welcome to the video. We are breaking down probably my favorite race of the season, right up there with the Bristol night race. But we are talking the Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona International Speedway for Saturday night. Yes, if you're watching this video on Sunday, I am sorry, but you missed the race. I'm sure some of you that does pertain to, so I do apologize. But we are racing on Saturday night, August 27th, around 7 p.m. Eastern. Weather aside, hopefully that does cooperate, but we know how Florida can be in the summer, especially now that I am living in it. I never used to know how bad it was, but it rains each and every single day in the summer here, so we just got to get a little bit lucky. We just saw qualifying get canceled. There's no practice on the schedule this weekend, although that would be irrelevant anyway. But I'm really looking forward to this race. I love super speedways, and while they can be a bit hard to project from a DFS perspective, they are awesome to watch from a fan perspective, and not to mention this is the playoff cutoff race, which just adds in even more drama, although Kurt Busch did kind of limit the drama a little bit, withdrawing from the playoffs, now opening 2 extra spots instead of the one where Ryan Blaney and Martin Truex Jr. were both really going to have to sweat that out. But this should still be a really fun time. If you are a fan of chaos and carnage and wrecks, this is your type of race. But anyway, if you are brand new here, my name is Chris Pennell. I break down the NASCAR DFS slate each and every single weekend on this channel. You can also find me live on Sunday mornings, although it's going to be Saturday this week, and I'm not sure exactly what time. I'll try to ask you guys what time sounds the best, but I have the Stochastic live show, I believe at 5. The race is at 7. Maybe we do it at 6, do a live before lock. I'm not totally sure yet. I will try to let you guys know, but come in, have a good time, hang out. Always a great time in the live shows. And you can also find me over on Stochastic doing their live before lock shows and writing tournament articles over on the website if you ever want to check those out. And if you do end up enjoying today's free content, the only thing I ask in return from you, something very small, is just to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are brand new, and hit that bell so you get notified whenever I post new content. I'll go live on Sundays or Saturdays this week. And feel free to leave a comment down below, agreeing or disagreeing with anything I say throughout the duration of today's video. Or if you want to tell me hi or I suck, you are free to do that as well. And if we could once again get 300 plus likes on this week's video, I'm pretty sure we've hit that goal every single week this year. It is a Saturday video, so might be a bit tougher this weekend, so I'll give you guys some leeway. But if we could keep hitting that, that'd be awesome. I truly do appreciate it. It doesn't just help me out, helps us all out. As the more eyeballs that see this, it just helps us all out in general, so I do appreciate that. And don't forget to check out the sponsor of the show, Prize Picks, that do make these videos possible. And as of right now, if you're new, signing over there, you can get an instant deposit match bonus up to $100. There's no strings attached. It is free money. Use it to your advantage and use promo code CPEN using the link down below, or head over to prizepicks.com. If you don't live in a legal betting state, this is the best way around it. I've lived in Ohio, I lived in Florida. You cannot bet there legally, but you can play Prize Picks, at least in Florida, not in Ohio. And it's a really fun way to get some DFS / betting action. It's kind of all mixed into one, and you can win up to 10 times your entry fee. So check it out. Again, promo code CPEN. Take advantage of the awesome promos that they have going on over on the site. But with that being said, I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this weekend's race. And as previously mentioned, this is your Coke 400 at Daytona International Speedway. There's your outline of the track. It's pretty large. It's 2.5 miles in length, most comparable to Talladega. We can also throw Atlanta in the mix now, though I think it races a little bit different there, but it's still pack racing nonetheless. It is a super speedway, 160 laps on the schedule, 112 odometer points, but just about over half of those are completely unprojectable. Fast laps, you cannot project them at a track like this. Completely random throughout the pack since we are drafting off of one another, so that just means lap leaders really are not that important. It all just really comes down to place differential and finishing position at the end of the day. And as I've always said at super speedways, we're gonna have a big one, especially at Daytona. Sometimes Talladega can be a bit hit or miss, but I can promise you there's gonna be a big one at Daytona, especially for the playoff cutoff race. And it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when it is going to happen. We see high attrition at Daytona. I think we're averaging like close to 20 cars wrecking out the past few seasons. So yeah, I would definitely bank on a lot of wrecks to be happening. So if you're wondering what that means for roster construction, it means play mostly guys starting in the back, but that does not mean you have to strictly play drivers in the back. I think everyone gets the stack the back strategy a bit mixed up, thinking you have to play every single driver starting in the 30s. No, you can mix and match some drivers getting closer to the front. I typically have a rule of thumb where I am 0 to 2 drivers starting in the top 12. I'm 0 to 3 or 4 drivers from starting 13th through 24th, and then I want at least 3 drivers up to 6. I mean, you can make a whole lineup with drivers starting in the back. I am fine with that, but 36 drivers starting 25th on back. I think that's typically a good rule of thumb. I think for the top 5, I'd put a max of 0 to 1 there. It's just really tough for a driver starting inside the top 5 to be optimal, although we have seen it before. But even then, we've seen where the winner on the pole, or the guy starting on the pole, wins the race and is not in the optimal lineup because there's not enough place differential points that they got compared to a lot of the other drivers, and the dominator points don't just add up as much as it would in a normal track where fast laps are a lot more projectable. And I can show you examples of this on the screen here. So if we look at the heat map, and this really just paints the picture of why we want drivers starting closer to the back. And like I said, it is fine to target some drivers here and there starting closer to the front, especially in tournaments. But for the most part, a lot of these drivers in the optimal lineup do come from 20th on back. And if you're just looking at it, I mean, everyone's got an equal chance of wrecking. So the mean here is where everyone finishes about 20th. And I mean, Kyle Larson finishing 20th is 4 points compared to a guy like Corey LaJoie finishing 20th. You're looking at 34 points. Now, obviously, there's going to be ceilings and floors. But let's say Kyle Larson hits the max floor here. That's negative 38 points compared to a guy like Noah Gragson, where his max floor is looking at negative 2 points. Like, yes, if they both wrecked out early on, it sucks. They're not going to be optimal, but you could still outscore the Kyle Larson owner by 30-some points in that situation. So, I mean, for the most part, yes, you want drivers starting closer to the back. I don't think I'd go below Brad Keselowski, or I should say above Brad Keselowski. In cash games, we'll talk about that in the driver-by-driver breakdown. In tournaments, yes, I don't mind getting to some of these drivers, but if you're playing cash games, Brad Keselowski and below is really where you're going to want to live in the majority of your lineups. Another thing to talk about here is leaving salary on the table. That is perfectly fine to do. We did see the entire salary used at Talladega earlier in the season, but we had some massive chalk that was pretty expensive starting in the back, so I think that's a bit of an anomaly there. I've seen situations in the past where we've had nearly like $20-some thousand on the table in the optimal lineup. That was a ton of chaos. That was at Daytona. Like the entire optimal lineup was a bunch of scrubs starting in the 30s. And while that's possible, it's not fully expected. But I was playing around with some hand builds, some cash builds. I don't mind leaving $12,000 on the table. That's not a bad looking cash lineup. You can even leave even more of that on the table if you want, just going strictly with drivers starting closer to the back. But I mean, leaving money on the table is something certainly fine to do. I mean, a lot of my lineups would probably at least leave a few thousand on the table, because I think if you're maxing out your salary this week, just looking at where drivers are starting, it's probably not the best route to go. So if you have money on the table, I would feel pretty good about it. It's always a good way to get different, because there's going to be people out there that's going to try to max out their salary. They're going to try to get all the big name drivers in. And if you're doing that at a track like this, is usually the wrong way to go about it. And there was one more thing I wanted to show you guys from a strategy standpoint that I think is probably the most useful thing that I've showed you guys yet. So as you know, the Millionaire Maker from the Daytona 500, he's part of my Discord channel, part of the YouTube. He's been here for a long time. We were talking over the course of the week, and he showed me his ownership spreadsheet that he made just based off of what for the Daytona 500. And I'm not saying to completely copy this, but it just goes to show this kind of strategy does work. Like, this is worth $1 million here. So if you're looking at the field here, this goes down from the qualifying order first through, I think it was 40th. And it has the ownership there from the field. Then he has his ownership difference. And then on the left column there, in column E, it's his own personal exposure. And as you can see, basically fading the top 10. And that ended up working out. Did have 1% Brad Keselowski because he's a good plate racer. But as you can see, it starts to get more and more exposure the further down you go. And some of the spots were chalky, you go underweight. Some of the spots that are underweight, you go overweight on, or under on the field, I should say, then overweight in your own personal exposure. So I think this is a good kind of concept to look at and try to judge how you should build super speedway lineups, because like I said, this is worth $1 million, and this is usually a really good route to go when building super speedway type builds. But anyway, getting to the driver by driver breakdown portion for this week's video. If you want my overall thoughts on the pricing here, I think it sucks on DraftKings side. I think their pricing was extremely lazy. Doesn't look too much different from what we saw at Watkins Glen. It looks like they changed a couple of things, but yeah, I think it's bad. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the pricing is anyway, because you can just build whatever lineup you want into Super Speedway, but very poor pricing. This is one of the few times where I think FanDuel did a much better job on their pricing. I mean, Bubba Wallace being below 8K, but 12.5 over on FanDuel. I mean, I'm not sure why he's so cheap. You have Denny Hamlin priced below a guy like Kyle Larson, who's the second most expensive driver on the slate. I know they didn't know he's going to qualify in the pole, but even then, he's a terrible super speedway racer. So pricing just a little bit off over on DK this week, but since it's a super speedway, I guess we will let it slide. And if you do want access to the sheet that I'm previewing for free for you guys over on YouTube, link can be found down below for that if you want to join the community. And it's the end of the month, so if you do want to sign up, you can get this last week for free. as long as you stay signed up for September. We have other sports coming. NFL, obviously a big one starting in September. We still have baseball going on. So if you want to come and join the community, this is one of the best times to do so. And there's a ton of extra content over there. Previewed the heat map for you guys, but there's simulation scores for DraftKings, FanDuel, also the prize picks projections, the cheat sheet, the ownership projections, which are very important for a track like this. You also have the optimizer, which can build as many lineups as you want, export it to DraftKings. So come in, check it out. We got the Discord that's always popping, tons of extra content over there, including the article and much, much more. But anyway, I will shut up about it and get on to it. So we'll start up top with Chase Elliott, the most expensive driver on both sides. 10-5 over on DK. He's starting in the front row with his teammate Kyle Larson. Another front row for Hendrick Motorsports at a super speedway. How surprising. Didn't qualify for it, but the lineup formula ended up working in their favor there. Both had excellent races at Watkins Glen. But odds-on favorite to win this race. I mean, it's hard not to like Elliot at a super speedway. The problem is, from DFS perspective, hard to like him starting in second. He's averaging the most DraftKings points per race at these track types this year. He's got the best average finish, the second best running position, the best drive rating. Has a win, only one top 5, but he's been in the top 10 each and every single time. Also the second most laps led as well. Won the most recent race at Atlanta, 7th at Dega, 6th at Atlanta again, then 10th at Daytona. If you're looking at the past 16 races since 2019 when we ran the tapered spacer, some of the overall best numbers. The problem is he's starting second. I don't think I can have more than 5% Chase Elliott, unfortunately. He's going to be higher owned than that, so I recommend going underweight on Elliott. I wouldn't completely fade him because there's a chance he could lead, 30, 40 laps in this race to win. If he does that, I wouldn't say it's a lock to be optimal, but I'd say there's a decent chance he gets into the optimal unless some of these place differential plays just absolutely smash. But I'm probably looking at under 5%, definitely under 10% exposure to Elliott, but I would imagine he's going to come in probably close to 15, 20% ownership despite being in the front row. Kyle Larson, $10,400, his teammate. He's starting in the pole. He's an auto fade for me. I will have exactly 0% Kyle Larson. He's just not good at super speedways. Yes, I know he finished 4th at Talladega, but 30th at Atlanta, 32nd at Daytona, 13th at Atlanta. For him to be optimal, he's got to win the race. It's as simple as that. So if he wins the race, so be it. Even then, he still might not crack the optimal lineup. We saw that in the past where I think Stenhouse won the race starting from the pole. Don't believe using the optimal lineup, so I feel pretty comfortable about being underweight on the front row here, but I will have 0 Kyle Larson. I would rather play Elliott if I was forced to pick between the two. And it's going to be pretty good to be underweight there because they're going to carry some ownership. These are big name drivers. They're good drivers, but not really the kind you want to target at a track like this for where they're starting. I'd much rather play the next 2 drivers here. We have Ross Chastain, $10,200 on DraftKings. Starting in 12th, he has been superb at the plate races this year. And yes, I know I say plate races, but I'm just used to saying that, so I think you guys get what I'm saying. But besides wrecking out at Daytona early in the season where he finished 40th, we had finishes of 2nd, 1st, and 2nd. Top 5 3 out of the 4 times, 3 out of 3 times in the ones he's been clean at. And we know he's a good super speedway driver. He's got a win under his belt at 1 this season, and I don't really see a reason why we wouldn't like Ross in tournaments. Obviously, you can't get there in cash games starting in 12th. But if you were playing tournaments, I would definitely try to get to some Ross. I think we can see him close to 20% ownership in this race. That might be a bit pushing it, but I'm still going to have double-digit exposure to Ross here, but definitely only a tournament play for me. Then we have Ryan Blaney to round out this 5-figure range, 10K over on DK. Has a nice sigh of relief with Kurt Busch withdrawing here. Next definitely gives him a lot more leeway. Average running position of 8.5 at the Super Series this year, which is the best in the series. Second best drive rating, has a couple top 5s. I believe it was the first Atlanta race where he kind of got screwed at the end. I want to say he was running top 5, and then I think he ended up getting into the wall at the end there where he limped to a 17th place finish. But besides that, 5th at Atlanta, 11th at Dega, 4th at Daytona early in the season. He's a great tournament play. The problem is, since he is Blaney at a super speedway, he's going to carry some ownership, but starting in 16th, you have to have some exposure there because he definitely has top 5 upside, if not race winning potential here. We know how strong he is at plate races. Dropping down to the 9K range, talking about good plate racers, Joey Logano at $9,800. The problem is he is starting in 3rd, and that top 3 is a gauntlet. You got Elliot, you got Larson, you got Joey Logano. Now, Larson's not nearly as good as the other 2 at super speedways. Logano, one of the best in the series, excellent at getting up front and dominating these types of tracks. Although so far this year, it hasn't been too pretty for him at the super speedways. 26th at Atlanta, 32nd at Dega, 9th at Atlanta, and 21st at Daytona. Also only averaging 3.5 laps led per race in one top 10 finish. But if you expand that to the past few seasons, these track types, believe the second most laps led per race, and obviously always a contender to get up front. The problem is he's very aggressive, and that does lead to him not finishing too many of these races. So you got to be careful with Logano, especially starting in third. He's a guy where I don't think I could get the over 10% exposure to. I might end up landing in that 5 to 8% range just in case he wins the race, but even then I might not get quite the 5%, so I'll have to be pretty low on Logano. But I really like who the drivers are that started in the top three, because they're going to carry some ownership, and I do think that's going to be some pretty bad ownership. Definitely a really good spot to get underweight to the field on. Tyler Reddick, $9,700. He's starting in sixth. FanDuel is below 9K, so maybe it's a little bit easier to get to him over there, but I don't really have any interest in Tyler Reddick at all. He's finished 29, 39, 28, 35th. Just seems to always get into wrecks at super speedways, even if you're looking at the past 13 races at these track types. Average finish of nearly 25th, only 3 top 10s, no top 5s, and look, if Reddick doesn't win the race, he's probably not going to be awful. Maybe if he finishes second, maybe he can sneak in there, but he's basically got to win, and I just don't really see that happening for Reddick, unfortunately. I'd much rather play Denny Hamlin, $9,600. He is starting in 19th, one of the best super speed racers. Obviously has multiple wins at Daytona, but hasn't had the finishes at them this year. 25th at Atlanta, 18th at Dega, 20th at Atlanta, and 37th at Daytona early in the season. I'll tell you right now, he was pretty chalky at Daytona, I believe. I know he was starting close to the back, and then he obviously killed a lot of lineups. If you're looking back at the past few seasons at these, though, I mean, 7 top 5s, which is the most in the series, the most laps led, the most wins. Yeah, it's hard not to like Hamlin here at Daytona. Starting in 19th, he's definitely viable in tournaments, but I think he's going to carry some cash ownership. But, I mean, starting in 19th, that's not... Like, yes, I know it's some place differential, but we have 40 cars in the field. He's above mid-pack. There's definitely a lot of risk there, and he's not great at finishing these races so far this year, at least clean anyway. So, while I like him in tournaments, he's going to project well because of who he is. It's still probably a good spot to be a tad underweight. Kyle Busch kind of in that same category, obviously not quite the super speed racer that Denny Hamlin is, but he's usually running up front for the most part, but he has some awful luck, because if you're looking at the past several years for Kyle Busch at super speedways, he has one of the best average running positions in the field at 12.8, but an average finish of 20.4, and only 4 top 10s and 2 top 5s to show for it. Also been a guy that can get up front, and he's gotten a little bit better with the finishes so far this year. 3rd at Talladega, 6th at Daytona. If he does anything like that at this race, yeah, there's a good chance he can crack the optimal. So I don't mind Kyle Busch. He's starting mid-pack. There's some place differential, but I do think the ownership is going to be a bit high for a driver that could obviously get caught up in a wreck. So you got to be careful with some of these high ownership mid-pack drivers. And I don't mean mid-pack drivers as far as they're going to run mid-pack. I mean as far as where they're starting. Just be careful, but Kyle Busch definitely in play for me. Just kind of worried about where that ownership's going to land. Daniel Suarez, $9,200. He's starting in 4th. It's going to be really tough to play any Suarez. Basically has to win the race. Did finish 4th at Atlanta early in the season. Then 6th again, the most recent race at Atlanta. But 31st at Dega, 18th at Daytona. If you think Suarez wins, sure, go for it. But I'll probably have less than 5% on Daniel Suarez, if any. Martin Truex Jr., $9,000. He's starting in 13th. Usually a guy that I completely just fade at super speedways. But he's actually been pretty good at them so far this year. I believe he's got the 5th best drive rating at them. One of the best average finishes, tied with Ryan Blaney, actually. 12.2 running position. He's been inside the top 15 each and every single time. And he's certainly not locked into the playoffs, so I'm sure he's going to want to have a pretty good race here. Finished 11th at Atlanta, 5th at Dega, 8th at Atlanta, 13th at Daytona. I just wish he was starting a little bit further back, but he's in play for tournaments. But he's probably going to have to crack the top 5 to have a chance of being optimal here, so can't get to a ton of Truex, unfortunately. Dropping down to the 8K range, we have Chase Briscoe, who is free over on FanDuel. It's a little expensive on DraftKings, but again, pricing doesn't matter. Starting in 26th, though, hard not to have some exposure here. You don't need an incredible race from him to really pan out too much. Finished 3rd at Daytona earlier in the season, 15th at Atlanta, wrecked out at Talladega, but 16th at Atlanta. I think he's a fine play. He's a French cash play for me. Not sure you have to go up to Chase Briscoe, but certainly playable. Christopher Bell, $8,600, starting in 5th. I can't really play Christopher Bell. I want to say the first Atlanta race where he finished 23rd, he was going to finish 2nd, but then he got the penalty at the end of the race, which put him at the back of the the drivers that were on the lead lap. So it's a bit skewed there, but overall, it's basically the Suarez situation where it pretty much has to win the race. So that's going to lead me to probably under 5% exposure on Christopher Bell. Austin Cendrick, $8,500, starting in 14th. I can get with some Austin Cendrick. We know these Penske drivers are really good plate racers for the most part, and if they can team up, train the front, and finish up front, that's not a terrible day for Austin Cendrick. I do think he could be a bit of a sneaky tournament play here, starting 14th, kind of in that no man's land where he's not place differential, he's also not in the front. Because people always play drivers in the front because they're used to it. Then people always play the guys in the back for place differential. But when you kind of get to that 11th to 18th range, 11th to 19th range, it's where you can see some of these drivers that aren't huge names go a little bit overlooked, I should say. So finished third at Atlanta recently, won the Daytona 500. I don't mind Cendrick at all in tournaments. He's definitely going to be a pit off of Byron, who's going to carry heavy ownership because of what his name is. And speaking of Byron, starting in 17th, won the race at Atlanta early in the season, absolutely dominated that track. 30th at Daytona though, 30th at Atlanta recently, 15th at Talladega. You're going to need basically a top 8, top 6 from Byron to be in the optimal here, but it's certainly possible. He's a pretty good plate racer. He does wreck out a lot at these, but that's just mainly due to bad luck, and we usually see him pretty much on the front row, and the fact that he's not does make him a lot more playable than he usually is at a super speedway, so I don't mind getting to some Byron. Bowman you can basically put in the same exact category, but he's starting 7 spots further up, which does make him definitely a bit riskier of a play. And the best finish we've seen from him so far this year at a super speedway is 9th at Dega, then 10th at Atlanta. So for Bowman to be in the optimal, again, you pretty much need a top 3 finish out of that, and I wouldn't say it's the most likely thing. So we'll have some pretty limited exposure on Alex Bowman. Kevin Harvick, $8,000. He is free on FanDuel, but I mean, again, pricing isn't the biggest deal this weekend, but I've never seen him so cheap. But $6,200 starting in 7th. I know he's not the best plate racer, but he's actually been pretty good at just grabbing good finishes over the years. He's got 3 top 5s, 6 top 10s, typically always inside the top 20, but starting in 7th, it's going to be really tough to find Harvick in the optimal lineup. So some very, very limited exposure to him, probably under 5%. Dropping down to the 7K range, we have pretty much the best play on the slate. I would fully expect him to be the highest owned driver on the slate as well, and that's never really fun to say for Bubba Wallace, but it's hard not to like him here. One of the best plate racers in all of NASCAR. I don't want to call him free, but he's extremely cheap over on FanDuel. You do have to pay a premium for him, but he's still an excellent play over there. He's got some of the best odds to win this race over in Vegas. Obviously, a win could get him into the playoffs. Starting in 30th, he's finished at the top 20 each and every single time he's been at a track like this so far this year. Also finished at the top 15 3 out of 4 times. If you are playing cash games, he's a cash game lock. If you're playing tournaments, he's going to be extremely chalky, but for good reason. He's an excellent play. Looking at the past several years for Bubba Wallace at super speedways, inside the top 20 12 times, inside the top 15 9 times. Also has 4 top 5s and a win under his belt. Rain shortened race at Talladega, but it's hard not to like Bubba here. Probably the highest owned driver on the slate. But you gotta be careful, because if his ownership is approaching the 40s, maybe the 50s, I don't think I could go that high on a driver at a track like this. So I would probably end up being underweight there, but he'll still probably end up being my highest owned driver. Chris Buescher, $7,700. He's starting in 8th. Bit of a tough play here. There was a stretch where Buescher was just a machine at just not wrecking at super speedways. Kind of gotten unlucky the past 2 weeks, but the past 2 times we've been in a super speedway, where he finished 33rd at Atlanta and 38th at Talladega. Finished 7th at Atlanta though early in the year, 16th at Daytona. But for where he's starting, again, we're talking about a guy that needs like a top 3-ish finish, potentially win the race to be optimal, which certainly possible for Buescher. He's hunting for that playoff spot, but it's going to be really tough to get to a lot of him. Ty Gibbs, $7,500, free over on FanDuel, starting in 23rd. Obviously, no cup statistics at super speedways, but starting in 23rd, that makes him viable. I mean, I'm not going to go out of my way to really play a ton of Ty Gibbs, but I'll probably get over 15%, maybe even 20%. I'll have to see what my sim scores say, but I can't imagine he's going to project out too poorly for me. Michael Mcdowell, basically the same exact play as Chris Buescher, which I feel like I say that almost each and every single week. He's got a couple top 10s at the super speedways this year, finishes at 8th at Talladega, 7th at Daytona. Actually a really good plate racer for the most part. But Chris Buescher is pretty good too, but Michael Mcdowell does have a win at Daytona. He's got 4 top 5s here the past 16 races, 10 top 15s. I could see him getting up front, leading some laps at some point. I'm not saying it's the most likely thing, but I think he can hang around this top 5. But for him to be optimal, there's a lot of place differential plays around him, so he's going to have an absolute pristine race, which is going to lead me to lower exposure, because the chances of a pristine race at Daytona is definitely slim pickings. Brett Kislowski, $7,200. He's starting in 24th. one of the best super speedway racers in all of NASCAR. Obviously has to get a win here, which sounds dangerous for the field. Guys like Kislowski, Stenhouse, those kind of guys gunning, or even Bubba Wallace gunning for a playoff spot just sounds absolutely terrifying. So we'll have to be a little bit careful there. Rostering Brad Kislowski will not be for the faint of heart, but if you're playing cash games, I think he's a good play all around. I'll definitely be one of my higher exposed drivers. Projections are going to end up liking him. So I see no reason not to really like Brad Kislowski here, besides a high incident rate that we typically see for him at super speedways. Austin Dillon, $7,000. He's starting in 21st. He's also a former winner at Daytona, finished second at Talladega early in the season. He's had some bad luck here, 35th at Atlanta, both the races so far this year, 25th at Daytona, but he's definitely a guy that has top 15, top 10 upside, so I don't mind getting Dillon in tournaments. Definitely going to be lower owned than Brad Kislowski. Dropping down to the 6K range, this could potentially be one of the better tournament plays on the slate. Erik Jones, $6,900, starting at 11th. He's been excellent at the plate races this year. He's obviously hunting for a playoff spot. 4th at Atlanta, 6th at Talladega, 14th at Atlanta again. Finished 29th at Daytona, but Erik Jones has been running up front. I believe he's got the 3rd best average running position in the field at these types of tracks so far this year, with one of the best average finishes and one of the better average DraftKings points per race as well. So I realize the starting spot's really rough, but he is priced in between a ton of place differential with Brad Kislowski, Austin Dillon, Almarola, Daniel Hamrick, so he's going to go completely overlooked. And this might be one of the few spots closer to the front where I try to get some leverage on the field in a positive direction, not being underweight. Aric Almirola, $6,700, just announced a few minutes ago that he's not retiring. Got a couple more years, I believe, with Smithfield. Obviously, getting some nice money from the Bacon place. But starting in 27th, he's going to be a fun cash game play. He's obviously excellent super speedways. A couple top 10s at them this year. Does have a top 5, some of the most DraftKings points per race. 5th at Daytona early in the year, 13th at Talladega, 8th at Atlanta. If you're playing cash games, you're probably throwing in Aric Almirola. I think he's an excellent play for dating back to the past 16 races. Overall, he's been better at Talladega than Daytona, but it's just some really consistently strong numbers, so I don't see a reason not to like him. Daniel Hamrick, $6,500, starting in 28th. I think he went a lap down early at Daytona, ended up coming back, finishing 12th. Obviously, if he finishes 12th starting in 28th, he will take that all day. Finished 36th at Talladega, issue early on. I think that's what took out Chris Buescher, if I remember correctly. But starting in 28th, fine for cash games, but overall just a very strong play. And I hate that I don't have too much analysis to say about these drivers, but it's basically if you're starting in the back and if you avoid wrecks, you're going to be a pretty good play on this slate. Justin Haley, $6,400. I think this is a similar play to Erik Jones, where probably a spot starting into the top 20 where I want to be overweight on the field. He's an excellent plate racer, very good in the Xfinity Series. That's kind of translated to the Cup Series, obviously in better equipment now these days for colleague racing. 7th at Atlanta, 12th at Talladega, 11th at Atlanta. I honestly think I'm not sure I'm going to call him race-winning upside, but I do think he could crack the top 5. I would not be overly surprised about that. Ricky Snosh Jr., $6,200, starting in 20th. All he does is wreck out super speedways now, but tends to get his way towards the front. It's just he not able to hold his ground and keep it up front. He just tends to find himself in a wall, but starting exactly mid-pack, this is like exactly what you'd want out of a tournament play, where it's wreckers or checkers for Stenhouse. That is certainly going to be the case. He's cheap. I'll get to some exposure in tournaments. I honestly could see myself getting close to 15-ish%, but it's going to be a scary 2015. But it's going to be a scary 15 to 20% on Ricky Stenhouse. Cole Custer, $6,000. He's starting in 15th. Kind of an ugly play here. He does have a top 10. Finished 9th at Atlanta, but for Custer to be optimal, you're basically looking at a top 5, top 8 starting in 15th. It's going to be tough to do. Like usually out of these cheap plays, you don't need much, but at a track where pricing doesn't matter and you're basically just looking for the top 6 scores in the slate, it's going to take a lot for Custer to be a top 6 scorer, so I'm not going to have too much exposure there. Then dropping down to the 5K range, all these guys are basically the same. If they don't wreck, they end up being incredible plays. But Corey LaJoie specifically isn't really good at these types of tracks. He almost won Atlanta over Chase Elliott at the end and ended up finishing 21st. But 5th at Atlanta early in the year, 14th at Talladega, 14th at Daytona. All this guy does is just grab good finishes. I think someone told me on his own podcast that he's not going to try to race to win and ruin the playoffs or something like that. But we don't really need him to win or anything. He's still been excellent at these track types, and he's actually averaging the most DraftKings points per race of all drivers the past few seasons at super speedways. Average finished at 14.9, which is only behind Austin Cendrick in a smaller sample size, and then Blaney and Chase Elliott. Like, he just knows how to grab good finishes at these track types. 8 top 15s, 5 top 10s, and 11 top 20s. If you're playing cash games, he's almost as safe as he gets back there. Dillon, $5,700, starting in 25th, has not had great luck at the super speedways this year, which is kind of opposite from what we've seen in the past from Dillon, where he just always seemed to finish inside the top 20, because as you can see, the past 12 races, average finish inside the top 20, 7 top 20s, 6 top 15s. So, I mean, anybody can get bad luck, and I think that just kind of goes to prove it at super speedways. Nobody is... Like, I remember the one year, I think Denny Hamlin had an average finish of 2.7 at the super speedways, and as you can see, he's had an issue almost every single time this year. So, no one is bulletproof. So that's why we never go too heavy on drivers in a track like this. Todd Gilliland starting in 32nd. The front row cars typically can run well at super speedways. Finished 17th at Atlanta. The other finishes haven't been too pretty, but it's mainly just not getting caught up in wrecks. And if he doesn't, starting in 32nd, can certainly gain you 10 plus spots in this race. Noah Gregson's going to be arguably the best, safest play on the slate. Finished 20th at Talladega early in the season. If he just doesn't wreck, he's going to be an excellent play. If you're playing cash games, he's an auto lock. He cannot hurt you. I think we talked about it earlier, but the worst he can do is -2 points. Just take the floor play there, but could very well make the optimal. I mean, if he cracks the top 20, I mean, he's going to score a lot of points on this slate. David Reagan was optimal at Daytona early in the year, I believe. He finished 8th there. Probably started in a similar spot, if I remember correctly. I want to say 35th, starting 34th in this race. If he can just avoid attrition, he'll be a pretty solid play. I don't mind David Reagan. Then dropping down to the 4K range. Not really sure why Harrison Burton's this cheap this weekend, but he is. Starting in 29th. Finished 10th at Atlanta, 25th at Atlanta early in the year, 39th at Daytona. I know the two bigger super speedways, Talladega and Daytona, hasn't been too pretty, but it's mainly just luck of the draw with that. So his price point for where he's starting, he's playable. And then I usually say no thank you to Cody Ware, Landon Castle, and BJ McLeod, those types of drivers, but you can actually play them this week. I'm fine with that. If you're looking at their finishes, Cody Ware, 23rd, 28th, 26th, 17th, Castle, 19th and 15th, and McLeod, 36th, but then 26th, 19th, 27th. So if there's ever a week to play these backmarker cars, this is the week to do it. Not saying playing the 20+% of these guys, but if they're going to be 2 to 5% owned, I don't mind being in the 10% range, because if there's a ton of wrecks, they're going to gain spots. And the great thing about these guys, they're not jockeying for position. So if there's a wreck, they're probably not in it, and they're going to get an auto gain of 10 spots depending on how many guys wreck out during this race. If 20 guys wreck out, they're going to absolutely kill it, and we will see them in the optimal lineup. But with that being said, that's all I got for you this weekend. If you made it all the way through, please let me know down below. I do appreciate it. Don't forget, this race is on Saturday, not Sunday. Leave a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are brand new. And I will see you tomorrow or today, whenever you're watching this, for the live stream. Not sure when I'm going to do it yet. I could do it before the stochastic stream. I could do it right after. We'll see. I'll try to let you guys know. But I'll see you all next time, and I wish you all the best of luck this weekend, because we are going to need it.